Attempts to find conclusive evidence that SARS-CoV-2 emerged from a secondary host at the seafood market in Wuhan continue. There's now been 3 pieces of research out there. We talked about one, again, about 2 months ago. Then the Chinese released some research based on some samples that they had taken in early 2020 at the market before they shut it down. And now there's a new piece of research. Nature News, which again is like the so-called journalistic arm of Nature, Nature being one of the 2 biggest science journals in the world, wrote the following. And you might show my screen here now, Zach. This is from May 4th, 2023. Wuhan market samples fail to shed further light on COVID origins. I would usually be showing the PDF version of a document because it's easier for me to have highlighted what I want to share. Interestingly, when I get the PDF, when I click that, download the PDF of this, it's not the same document. It's similar, but it's not the same document. That's the first time I've ever seen that happen. I don't know what that's about, but I'm going to read a little section from this piece here, again published in Nature News this past week on May 4th. Signs of infection. Neither of the 2 previous reports on the animal sequences could confirm that animals were infected with SARS-CoV-2. Bloom's analysis also supports these results. So I'm just going to stop there first. What kind of a crazy grammatical construction is that? Neither of the 2 previous reports confirmed infection. This analysis supports the failure to confirm that. So this feels like intentionally confusing language to make it seem like there's something there when there isn't. Bloom, the author of the current study, investigated whether environmental swabs rich in viral sequences were associated with genetic material from a particular animal, which could be a sign of infection. But there was no such association that made sense, says Bloom. In fact, the strongest associations were with species, such as fish, cows, and goats, that SARS-CoV-2 is not known to infect, says Bloom. Quote, this doesn't provide any more insight on whether raccoon dogs or any other animal there were or were not ever infected with SARS-CoV-2, he says. The swab data merely confirm that the virus was widespread at the market, he says. Again, point of order, I will say that had he found what he was looking for, he and everyone else who's trying to push this hypothesis would have found it to be confirming. But nothing can falsify their cherished hypothesis. They are not doing science because they have a landscape in which nothing that happens can possibly falsify their hypothesis. I will continue with the Nature News report here. We always knew, so this is from a conservation biologist at the University of Hong Kong, Alice Hughes. We always knew that we could not definitively say if raccoon dogs were carrying the virus or if there had just been a commingling of the DNA, says Alice Hughes, a conservation biologist at the University of Hong Kong who was not involved in any of the studies. Making inferences based on precise amounts of genetic material found in environmental samples is problematic, says Hughes. Hooray, an adult in the room. Some species are just going to be shedding more DNA than others, she says, because of the animal's size, their behavior, or how they are handled and processed at the market. Sequencing can also introduce bias, says Hughes, because some genetic sequences amplify better than others. All of this should be completely obvious to anyone doing this kind of research. Alice Hughes appears to be the only person being asked about this who actually is willing to say it out loud. Still, DeBar, and DeBar was, could you just give me my screen back for a moment, Zach? Because I've forgotten, it's in my notes. DeBar is an evolutionary biologist at the French National Research Agency, CNRS, in Paris. She was one of the co-authors of the first reports on the animal sequences. So, still, DeBar emphasizes that the latest analysis is important because it independently confirms that specific wild animals capable of being infected with SARS-CoV-2 were at the market before its closure. It also shows that those animals were located in the part of the market linked to the most human cases, which she says adds weight to the hypothesis the pandemic had a natural origin. No, it does not. No, it does not. And if she is anything, if she deserves the credentials which she apparently has, she knows that too. So if I may have my screen back so I can continue my little rant here with a few of the notes that I have. First of all, that's ridiculous. Okay, yep, go on. So I have a bunch more.
This strikes me as 2 things. Yep. One, this is analogous to p-hacking. Obviously, this is not statistical.
Right.
But the basic idea is, in a complex phenomenon, you can get spurious results periodically, and we use statistics to reduce the likelihood of us settling on one of these spurious results arbitrarily. it turns out that when you can play that game so that you have lots of results that have, some low likelihood of being the result of sampling error, that if what you do is you hunt for the rare result, then you'll get something that appears to be significant on its own, but wouldn't be significant if it was compiled with all of the looking. But in this realm, the basic idea is they're trying to build a
They're trying to build a legal case. It's like...
Well, it's a circumstantial case is the point, right? They're trying to build, here are lots of things that would be true if some animal had been infected and was in the market, and that's where people did get it. But the point is, yeah, you can compile a bunch of things that would be true in that scenario, and no number of them makes that scenario probable in light of the evidence that actually does point to the lab. But what we're doing is it's p-hacking, it's building a circumstantial case, but it's also...
It's very much akin to p-hacking in the same sort of way that it misunderstands and misapplies and misdirects people who don't understand probabilistic thinking.
Right, and I'm a little bit annoyed at whatever the author of XKCD is, who basically failed the COVID test and was on the wrong side of many issues throughout the pandemic. But prior to the pandemic, he had a cartoon about the association of jelly beans, I think it was with cancer. And anyway, the cartoon really clearly makes the point. 16 identical panels.
Two scientists. One, you can tell he's a scientist because he's wearing safety goggles. We found no link between purple jelly beans and acne, P greater than 0.05. We found no link between brown jelly beans and acne, P greater than 0.05. Pink jelly beans, blue jelly beans, teal jelly beans, salmon jelly beans, red jelly beans, turquoise jelly beans, magenta, yellow, stop me when I get to the, gray, tan, cyan, whatever that is. We found a link between green jelly beans and acne, P less than 0.05. Whoa, says someone off screen. We found no link, mauve, beige, lilac, black, peach, orange. And then I think the next XKCD is news. Green jelly beans linked to acne, 95% confidence, only 5% chance of coincidence. Except you saw, and they did, was it a 4x4? I think it must have been a 4x5 because he would have had 20 of them, right? Yep. And that means that if you ran 20 of these with different colors of jelly beans, and one of them says, oh, it's P less than 0.05, that is actually exactly random chance. And so this headline borrows from the one thing that doesn't look like a negative result and proclaims it as if none of those other tests happened.
Yeah. So anyway, one has the sense that this seafood market explanation
it's 5x4
is this kind of a game. Is it a circumstantial case that compiles a bunch of evidence that does point to it and ignores all of the countervailing evidence?
Right.
Is it analogous to p-hacking? Obviously there's no actual statistics being done here, but nonetheless it's the same theme, which is looking for the rare piece of evidence in the sea of neutral stuff that seems to indicate a connection. But it's also, it's that old routine from Get Smart, right, which we've referred to before. But Get Smart, which was a send-up of James Bond, in which Maxwell Smart is the man of intrigue, international spy, but he's also kind of a buffoon.
He's a bit hapless.
Yeah, it's not quite Inspector Clouseau, but nonetheless, there's something weird about and
he's not dashing.
Yes, he's not dashing. He's not super capable or any of the things that James Bond is. Anyway, he does this thing where his enemies, who are the control agents, control spelled with a K, who are obviously
right. This is from before our time.
Yes,
actually,
the
right?
60s.
This is like the 60s. Yeah.
But the control agents have captured Maxwell Smart, and they have him, in their clutches, and they're going to do something to him. And he says, you think you have me, but at this very moment, there's a squadron of such and such descending on this building with blah 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 blah. And the control agent says, we think you're lying. And he says, well, would you believe there's one squad car? And so he keeps going through a series of less and less frightening things that might be descending on the location, seeing what they'll believe. Anyway, it's that, right? It's like they're playing Would You Believe?
It is that. It's interesting.
Market.
Like, Would You Believe doesn't work if you've made all of your previous more ludicrous assertions out loud.
Yes.
Right. And this, of course, then raises the question of how often is this being done to us, where they were actually just barely savvy enough not to say the earlier versions out loud. Like, they happened to hit the right one first, where people were like, oh, okay. Well, that's okay. I didn't know. And, instead with the seafood market in Wuhan, they're just, it is, would you believe, it's Maxwell Smart style.
It's would you believe, where the punchline was delivered. It's got to be more than a year ago with frozen ferret badger steaks, right? That was the punchline. Yes. And that was the point at which we were all like, oh, come on. Like, there's nothing to that. You just made it up because somebody could imagine a virus riding in a frozen ferret badger steak. I mean, with zero evidence, they presented that as a hypothesis. Yep. And, I think a lot of people who thought that this was an actual scientific discussion at that point were alerted, aha, but I guess function like one.
That's part of why I wanted to bring this up again. So Nature News, again, the journalistic arm of one of the two most influential science journals in the world. And they publish, the piece that I just read from is in their weekly scientific journal. So not only are there what are deemed by the editors at Nature the most important scientific results published every week in Nature, but there's also the Nature News section is there. It's not a separate publication. I mean, Nature has like Nature Genetics, Nature Biotechnology, Nature has all these separate publications. This is in Nature itself, right? And do you have something to say before I
do.
Embark?
I am tempted, in an effort to put an end to this madness, to start the Frozen Ferret Badger Innocence Project, right? Yeah. In which we vindicate...
We're going to need a better acronym, though.
Yeah, it's not much of an acronym. Yeah. But nonetheless, I think it has a certain ring to it.
Frozen Ferret Badger Innocence Project.
Yes.
I mean, I guess that does raise questions about whether or not they were innocent before they were frozen, or did defreezing actually clear them of all guilt?
No, I am imagining, as long as we're in the realm of fantasy and we're not actually being obligated to biology or the scientific method or anything like that, I am imagining...
We still were.
Well,
we're playing in their sandbox.
Yeah, in their sandbox. Yeah. My feeling is the frozen ferret badger is actually an Arctic creature that has been wrongly implicated in the COVID pandemic.
Oh, named by some Arctic explorer who saw them and figured they must be frozen because here they live.
Exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't the frozen ferret badger popsicles that I was imagining when they first, I think it was at Dasek who proposed the frozen ferret badger as source of the...
I don't remember who said it first.
But I sort of imagined them having popsicle sticks.
Maybe it was Dasek.
Help them and,
yeah.
Expecting, because again, those crazy Chinese and those crazy culinary traditions that, and no, this isn't racist at all. Us ascribing truly insane things to other people and then blaming them.
Yes.
And how they eat for what you rot. Right?
Yes. He has blocked me. Dasek, which makes me feel doubly good for having called him patient zero for misinformation on the pandemic origins.
That's very, very good.
Back in the day.
Okay. A few more things about this ludicrosity that is far worse than just being ludicrous, of course, because they are actively and still trying to rewrite history. And this particular one they've been doing from the very beginning. Nature News, this research that Nature News is reporting on, is a preprint. Okay? That's fine. Except that every single time we were talking about preprints, especially early in the pandemic when almost all the research was preprints, we're told we can't. That's bad. You're not doing science. You're bad people. You're clearly incompetent because it's not peer-reviewed, therefore not science. Well, A, not true, and B, hold yourself to the same damn standards, right? So... This is a preprint.
Well, wait, if they hold themselves to the same standards...
Well, they can't win is why they're cheating, right? So we get it. We get, like, you're behind the eight ball here, but you're wrong. In fact, not only is this a preprint, but in this kind of realm, right? In our realm, often papers have single or two authors. But in the realm of virology, molecular biology, everything, they tend to have like author lists that go on and on. This is a single authored paper, which is, I think I've never seen that in this realm of biology before. And it doesn't necessarily say anything, but it's unusual enough that it was immediately noticeable by me. But what this single author has done, and this again, not yet peer-reviewed, just preprint paper, he did some stuff and he put it on a preprint server, and now Nature News is reporting on it, okay? Is using data released by China from the market in early 2020, he has, and I quote, implemented a fully reproducible computational pipeline that jointly analyzes the number of reads mapping to SARS-CoV-2 and the mitochondrial genomes of chordate species across the full set of samples.
I got it.
So it's a model. He's created some algorithm. He's plugged in data that the Chinese gave us, and all he's done is introduced a new model, which may or may not be accurate anyway. We have no way of knowing because we don't know what true is. So how do you assess the veracity of a model going forward if what you're trying to do, if the only thing that you are plugging into it is stuff for which you don't know what it means, you cannot assess it. Not science, okay? Not a scientific investigation at all.
You have become cynical. You are missing the obvious interpretation of the single authorness and that Baroque description of a model. He is academic distancing to fatten the curve.
I mean, to me, that sounds cute, but I don't have any idea what it's supposed to mean.
If you imagine he's looking for the area under the curve, because that's the only place you could hide a frozen ferret badger guilty of spreading a disease to planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
Then he needs to enlarge the curve, and he's going to do this as a lone wolf academician, which is why there are no other authors on that paper. I don't know, something in that
he's not. He's actually at Hutch. He's actually at the big cancer center in Seattle. So this is not a lone wolf guy, but this one-off model that we have no way of knowing how good it is. And even if it was good, it could not have demonstrated, it could not have said whether or not the hypothesis that he was purporting to test was or was not true. Is on a preprint server. And Nature News is reporting on it? Nature News is reporting on that little dinky piece of what even is it?